Joining us today on this episode of the AEC Disruptors is Ed Newton, president at Newton Group. How's it going, Ed?
Very good. Thank you, Christopher. All good.
We're excited to have you. We always like to start these conversations a little bit of getting some background in our guest. And so could you kind of tell us a little bit about, who are you, who is Newton Group? What are you all trying to achieve, kind of your big mission?
Yeah, I'm Edwin Newton, Ed Newton, they call me. And I'm the owner, founder, and president of Newton Group. And Newton Group is part of the Kiwi Newton Group, which is a sort of a little group of construction companies, really. And this company began in '94. And, we've sort of evolved now into what I'd call like an original building manufacturer, which is sort of a design builder, really, with manufacturing capabilities. And our mission really is just, my mission and the company mission is really growing a steady business, a company that sort of would be worth buying, say, when I'm gone, for one thing, producing better buildings for our clients, addressing some of the things around labor shortages, all of those sort of things are sort of organic in our sort of movement towards building in the plant. We're sort of pushing in that direction organically to increase our efficiency and bringing the work into the factory. And so our mission really is to sort of perfect that more as time goes along here, continuous improvements, and delivering a better building that would be cost effective, more cost effective capital costs, and more cost effective for the running costs of the building, and have environmental benefits as well, like given the lower energy usages that it'll have and lower maintenance costs. So, trying to address all of those things about buildings.
So pretty busy. So you mentioned you kind of more or less a design builder. So I guess in your company, you all have brought in all the different disciplines in-house?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so that most of them anyway, to make us sort of cost effectively to do what we do, we've sort of seen the need to bring that more in-house. Those electricians, some mechanical team members, then people that do sort of structural work like welding and fabricating, and concrete workers. So yeah, it's very much a vertically integrated team with a bit more of a narrow focus, I guess, on the type of building we build. And so we're focusing on our system buildings that we can efficiently deliver with our setup.
So what kind of sort of building project typology do you all specialize in?
Main one, there's several, but one of the bigger ones is parking garages. We specialize in those. That was a sort of a market that looks like it needed fulfilling. We sort of tend to go after the markets that are sort of unfulfilled, or where there's a shortage coming up, say, in the future, and parking being one of them. When you look over the pond at Europe and see a lot of their challenges, and densification of land and things like that. And even here we had the same thing beginning back in the early 2000s, around the GTA, when they put in things like green belts and stuff like that. So you can just see the writings on the wall where we have to be more efficient about land use. So I thought that the parking building and this idea, the system of ours being such an efficient one, would probably do all right in the marketplace. And it's not a big selling building, but it's a niche market, and it's a great solution for the parking issues, and it's a growing market for us. And then the other one is the Kiwi Condo system, which is actually a product that we came up with, a building system design. And essentially it's made of concrete panels, of floor panels, wall panels, shafts, all the bones of the building. And but we can take it many steps further with the integration of the mechanical, electrical, which there's a lot more of that on that type of building, say, as opposed to a parking garage. However, we're able to integrate on both of those buildings. We integrate the M&E things, M&E being mechanical, electrical, integrating them in the plan, into the design, and then trying to, carry more with our parts. Each piece carries more than, say, just a piece of concrete. It has a few other things to go with it, like the electrical, like if it had mechanical in it, or it might have insulation and architectural things on it. So again, trying to keep the work as much as possible on the production line, and then keeping it small enough in pieces that we can deliver it down the road to the site. And so that system is another one, that the Kiwi Condo, and it's good for any building, like a commercial building or a residential, multi-residential building where the owner would want a long-lasting concrete building. And having all these other attributes with energy and savings around carbon and such like that are going to come down the pipe, it's going to be an attractive building for the demand that's out there for the clients, especially the long-term keepers, the ones that want the building to last and cost less. And then other products we offer is like, say pedestrian bridges are quite common, and they're quite often associated with the garage or the office building or the connection between two buildings, So those type of applications we've been, applying the bridge to.
Okay.
And also the industrial, which is sort of a little up and down, but we serve those clients as well. And that's kind of our main focus, really.
So very busy.
Yeah, definitely. So, I come from the construction side, and in the US, we've had companies that have tried to pop up and say they're the turnkey solution. They have architects, engineers on staff, as well as, general contractor and everything below that, the subcontractors and things like that. And it hasn't worked here. And I think part of the reason, Chris and I recorded an episode on this company, and you might be able to guess who it was who tried to do it and failed miserably recently.
I did hear of a company. It's probably the same one. They had a lot of money, I think.
You're putting it nicely there.
Yes, absolutely. So, they tried to do everything too quickly. And that resulted in them failing. In the US, the construction sector has really fallen behind others in terms of efficiency. And with, margins being so low here, it's really hurt the bottom line for us. And then you also include the labor shortage here. It's made it almost impossible to build a building on time and in budget. And now we have, supply shortages as well. So all of that combined is making it very difficult to make money on buildings. So here, what we're trying to learn, and we're behind, is from manufacturing. Chris and I actually did an episode with the Forging Manufacturing podcast. Shout out to them. We'll see if they listen, if they ask me about this. And, we kind of, came to the conclusion that construction really needs to learn from manufacturing and adopt an assembly line approach, which can be difficult because, general contractors and subcontractors don't control the design. And I feel like when you control the design, you're able to look, towards the nuts and bolts and, be a lot more efficient.
Yeah, that's literally where the rubber hits the road. If you can't control the design, you're not going to be successful at manufacturing buildings in a factory, right? Because, you've got to design around your systems, around your logistics, the road logistics, the logistics of your plant equipment and your site equipment, right? And, we know there's various sizes of equipment, men and money can just about move anything or do anything. But, when you're trying to be economic, you've got to be careful about those things to keep it more sort of mainstream in that regard, in the logistics side. And so, you make those decisions when you build your plant, right? You got to make those decisions up front about, what sort of size of part you're going to have as a maximum. And then that sets the size of your cranes and things like that. And it's definitely not easy. And that's why so many companies wouldn't have done it, and we've sort of, I guess, being a startup company that we were back in '94. And then I just feel like we've sort of reinvented ourselves probably 2 or 3 times in the last 25 years. And but that's sort of what you got to do. But I'm still the founder as well. And, with some smart people around, that maybe one guy perhaps from Germany that has been a huge influence on us. And so helping to learn from those other people has been very helpful, and seeing, how they do it, right?
Did you start out, well, I guess one, and on the chance people can't tell, do you want to tell us where you're at or where you're from?
Yeah, actually, I'm originally, I came off a farm actually, from New Zealand. So my first 21 years of my life was pretty much in a farming environment. But I went to school, of course, and did all the educational things. And on the weekends and holidays and every time, and it wasn't school, even after school, I was sort of involved in helping my father or my brothers on the farm. And we were always assigned, work. And then by the time you got to an age of, say, 12, you'd be driving the bulldozer and the tractor, even the tractor at a younger age. And so, we were sort of given tasks to do all through our holidays and free time. And then that kind of gives you a lot of that background experience. And then, I left school and I went farming for 5 more years. But all of that was sort of helpful in a way, just to sort of give me, I guess, the natural part of things, to sort of understand more about the environment and what it does. And also getting a good background in civil work and machinery, which once I became a carpenter, I was dealing with hammers and nails and carpentry tools, not so much heavy machinery. So, that became my apprenticeship for my business now as it's moved forward, where we sort of have a mixture of rigging and heavy machinery and plant equipment and things like that. So I think it, one way or the other, it laid a good foundation for me to bring the company this far anyway, and hopefully a lot further. And now we're adding, I found myself, looking for people that had education, because I never had beyond my high school education. So, I have that practical experience, and especially from being a carpenter for years, that gave me the good practical building experience I needed. And then moving on to being a GC, or, organizing the sub trades and, just getting those buildings built. I was very comfortable doing all of that. And then as we transitioned though into this new stuff, this new sort of where we more heavily into design and build, and it's a design of our own, right? So when we use the consulting firms, we have to meet with them and make sure they want to adopt our design, before they become part of our team, say for that project, And so as I've been embarking more on that area, as the company's grown into that area, we've sort of had a big need for engineers and people with professional degrees. And I found that very refreshing, having those guys around me, because now, I can just go down the hall or just pick up my phone and I can get help straight away from an engineer, and get an answer without having a big to do about it, and so I think I can just see it's helping us more and more over time. And that was part of my goal too, was to be able to sort of improve, right? And with the old traditional way, and what Jackson, you were just referring to, like what's going on in the US, and Canada is very similar that way. And actually we're building in the US right now, and it's very expensive, and the demands are high and the labor is short. But that type of building up here, when I was doing the GC work and all that, it was hard to have any money left to sort of do any R&D or any of those things. So, we tend to take on more overhead in the manufacturing, but you sort of somehow you might better carve out some margin so you can put some money back into your business, and have your own systems studied and designed, right? Which is sort of what we've been doing now for quite a few years. And so it's a big commitment, but doing it organically, I think, might be better actually than, because if you just go at it like people have, like you mentioned, with a lot of money and just go at it, it's just because it's not organic, and maybe the guys running it haven't quite got the concept. Like, you have to be economic through and through from the beginning, right? So, if your business is not making money, it probably won't make money the following year either, even though you've got a new machine, So you have to sort of kind of work your business and your people to the point where they're all being efficient enough to turn a profit, as you grow, and that's what I've tried to do. We've had our ups and downs, and but there's been more ups than downs. So, it keeps me going. So.
It definitely seems like some companies do grow too fast, whereas you have made some, or your company's made some very logical transitions and of evolutions over time. And so now it seems like you're in this next phase of evolving into the factory a little bit, right? And so you mentioned, I believe, but you all own a couple factories, is that correct? Or how are you moving to the factory for manufacturing purposes?
Yeah, so what we did there about 10, 12, 13 years ago, we bought some land in the town where our office was, and then in Guelph here, and I set up office here on this new land and gave up our rented office. And we had 7.5 acres that we bought. It's industrial land, and then it had a building on it. So we started operating, just with some steel and actually bridge components out of the building, out of the factory side of it. And then the office we were utilizing for our administration and for running the projects. And then I had a plan, to go ahead and build my first plant. So we built the first plant in 2009, and then recently in 2020 we built the second plant now, so which is on the same land. So we're still chiseling away at the same land, but we're just increasing our production on the same land. So even it becomes a study in production and what you can do with less. So that was part of our mission, actually, was to do more with less, even back in 2004 and 5, when we started thinking about it. And it's some of it's hammering home true, it really is. And so we're getting, we even have parking issues here on our site now, on our 7.5 acre site. So, we've got ideas to put a parking garage here one day too. So
I wonder who could build it for you.
Yeah. And then we don't have to move. Right?
Are you accepting bids?
Was there a catalyst that sort of pushed you in the direction of building those factories?
Yeah, it was, because I wanted to build a better business, really. And I was sort of, I think, around the mid 2000s, I got to a crossroads where I was just like, I think I'd reached a threshold in my GC business where either I had to sort of find partners to try to grow the top line, and hopefully the bottom line stayed intact a bit, or, look for some other way and maybe reinvest in my business. But at the time I thought, well, because I was dabbling in development stuff, and that it became sort of oil and water with the construction company. The bonding companies don't like that when you're taking on different risks, and you have to have bonds too to complete construction projects. So, they kind of had me pointed more in the direction of construction, because that was the thing I really liked the most. The main thing was with developing was to give work to the construction company. So I was taking on developments to get construction work. And so I sort of, rather than sort of chase around trying to buy parcels of land to get the next development going, I started thinking about buying my parcel and then putting a factory on it, and where I could invest in our land to grow the business. And then it had to become like, okay, what am I going to do? But also I had the idea about what I was going to do as well, which was sort of embarking on the parking. At the time, I had a job, a contract to build quite a big parking garage underground. And I remember asking, why are we doing it like we were doing it? And the answer I got from the engineer was, because it was design build, but I just sort of paid them to do it, and they did it their way with the design. And I asked a few questions, and they said, well, that's the way we always do it. So
I hate that answer.
I thought, I didn't like the answer very much. And then I happened to be walking around over in Germany one day, and I am doing some other work for a client, getting a factory built. And that's where I came across another idea for parking, and I started delving into it. And, we ended up adopting a system actually that was started over there. So, and we brought it to Canada, and it took a lot of work to get it sold, to sell it even one, and to try to convince people that it was a good idea, and to get the approvals, right? That was a major, to try to get all that done, but we managed to do it in the end.
So what's the value prop that you tell people of why this system works, and how does it work?
Yeah, I guess you mean how's the value created, or I guess?
Just in general, if we're trying a different way, people don't like to change and people don't
Right.
like to do things differently, and where you're approaching it from a different perspective. How do you get people to buy into that vision of how to do it differently?
Yeah, well, it has a tough sell. The main thing is once you have something done already, then they see it, and then so having the first one built made it easier to get the second one.
Mhm.
So in the beginning, it was very awkward, very tough to sell. But I mean, the convincing really comes down to the price. It's always the almighty cost. So if the capital cost that, in the end, they're going to compare you with another garage builder or another GC that's coming with their price to build the garage. So they're going to compare us, and we're going to tell them we're going to be less, and then they're going to wait until we actually bid on it, and they might see it for themselves, and then we have to convince them of the technical issues, right? Which is usually sitting down with their consultants, and quite often, there's a lot of scrutiny and stuff that we have to come up with to try to convince them, right? About, because there's differences, there's a lot of different things about the building that aren't the same as normal. So
Is the
What I,
main? Oh, go ahead. See, every time. See, I don't see, he doesn't hold his mic. How am I supposed to know he's going to say something?
pause. What I like about your business model is it seems like there's a lot less room for conflict. I would run into a lot of situations in the field where we have our duct up in the air, and here comes the electrician late because that's just the way they roll. And they're like, "Hey, we have nowhere to run our conduit," and it's just instant conflict right there. And then you run to the GC, and they sort it out. You know, Meanwhile, the project's pretty much on halt, at least in that area. And for you, it's like, you have all these different parts working in song. It's like the 2012, 2013 San Antonio Spurs, the way they played basketball. And it was like very harmonious, and it was just like automatic. So, coming from the world of conflict every day, and having to deal with contracts and possible lawyers and everything like that, it seems like you really avoid that, and your main point of contact really is the owner, and then you handle everything else under the sun.
yeah, that's actually, you put it right on the head there, Jackson, I reckon. And that's a lot of the things that I disliked about when I became a GC. Like, it was great for a start, really great, exciting, getting these buildings up. But exactly that sort of confrontational stuff started, especially when we entered the general tender market with the design, bid and build, where the owners hired the architect and everyone's bidding on the same drawing. And because it's just such a low down price situation, and everyone's cutting margins to get the work, and then you get these situations where you have electricians not knowing the GC or not knowing who they're playing with on the same job, and they get to that job, and if it's something that they maybe haven't done a lot of because it's a prototype, where do we run the conduits, right? And then these sort of things happen, and then the next thing that happens is there'd be a bill or a change order request or something, right, because of that, or it can result in that. And also the other, then we end up dealing with these money problems, and having to fight those off, or deny them, or try to get them if they're legit. And it's also the trouble is sometimes you have a contract, and maybe the subcontractor goes bankrupt, and it might not be because of your job at hand. It could be another one that's affecting them, where perhaps they weren't paid properly or things like that. So yeah, a lot of times on that type of bidding market, you don't get a good chance to sort of pick your team and align with the team and all that. And you end up sort of being more of a lawyer and a risk taker than a builder, say. For me, that was a big deal, as I really enjoy building. I used to love carpentry because I could do a whole lot of work in a day, and then at the end of the day, look at it and go, well, that's today. Look what we achieved. Look what I did. And so there was very tangible and rewarding. and even getting into a GC to see what the teams did say on your sites, and that is rewarding. But then the further you get removed from that, you start to wonder, well, why you're doing it, which is sort of what happened to me in 2004 or 5. I started looking for new ways, right? And just trying to find a new way. So
What would you say is maybe the biggest challenge of having a vertically integrated firm that kind of handles it all?
well, I mean, it's challenging because because especially I think in the earlier years when, if you don't have a lot of work, you've got to somehow pay all these people, right? So you got to be very, very careful when you bring them on, and how that gets brought into place. Just making sure that you sort of can see your light of day ahead of you, that you can keep them busy, because the last thing you want is to try to get it started and then you have to shut it off again or something like that. So so I guess it's the potential overheads that you can end up with if the overhead costs, if you're not sort of careful. So that's why it kind of, with us, it's been happening fairly slowly, not sort of at rocket speed. We sort of our turnover, I guess, as overall did not increase that much in the last I guess in the last few years it probably has, but for the first, say, 5 or 10 years as we embarked into this, our top line didn't really go up, but our bottom line was getting better, but our overhead also gets better too. But at least we have some money to cover that then, right? And then you start sort of looking to the future and say, well, if I've got more overhead, but I've got more capability, and if I can just sort of amp up that sale, and keep my margins the same, then there's success in the making, and developing systems that you can apply to your buildings and all that sort of thing, putting more thought into the beginning end of it rather than waiting for working on site. And so the savings start to roll, but it's very hard to start it off, that's for sure.
I kind of want to shift gears a little bit because, when we first talked we touched on this idea of sustainability. And when we look at your website it's very obvious that this is something you're very passionate about. I'd be curious, one, just to even get us started, is what is it your company is doing to help promote sustainability? And is it kind of one of your core missions that you all are trying to adopt?
Yes, it's definitely a core mission in our buildings that we're adopting. That even came to my mind like in the late 90s. I was sort of determined to go in that direction, and more so as time goes on. And actually, for main reason, actually, well, apart from being, having an affinity about the environment and understanding that, we've got to have clean air, clean water, and all these things. It's true. We have to go at it in a balanced way, but there's just no doubt we have to conserve on energy. We have to conserve on all of these things, and reduce carbon and reduce pollution, and reduce the footprint, and increase productivity. So and really it was more of I think it's sort of an economic thing as well, you see, because if you look long term, right, I mean, that'll be the winner, because we have to become more efficient and use less energy. So I thought of it more as a sort of a place. If you start early enough, you end up in the right place down the road when the world's ready for you, kind of thing.
And when we first talked, obviously I didn't know anything about the farming experience, but it makes a lot of sense that you would be passionate about sustainability when that is sort of your foundational element.
Yeah, exactly. And seeing, when you're farming, you don't have any money, so you tend to be able to solve problems, creatively, perhaps without all the fancy bells and whistles, right? Like drainage or different things you can do and ways to do things. And I think that sort of helped. Maybe it's the creativity side, that all those solutions that had to be found in my younger years kind of help us now, where we're always trying to find solutions, but we always think about the owner's pocket, like when we start talking to an owner, I mean, there's very few of them that don't care about the cost. And then our job is to sort of make sure that they get what they want, and keeping that cost in check, right? So we're always got an eye for the scope, the scope of work, and how do we reduce that, say, and that's the advantage with the design build, is where you can try to eke out the owner's requirement and reduce the cost. And I think a lot of that would be helped from my earlier years of where, money wasn't very plentiful, right? And, so you're trying to deal with slim pickings.
Do
It
you
seems
see
like
see twice? That's on me.
that was on you. I'm just
Hey, you know what?
kidding.
This is first episode. We got to work through all these little
Yeah,
jitters
that's
here.
true. It's true. Got to work out the kinks.
Go ahead.
So what I've seen mostly, it's a lot of solar. Have any of your clients approached you about any other methods to like power the building, or something like rainwater collection? And also, are there any emerging materials in construction that interest you?
It's like 8 questions.
Yeah.
It's first run.
Yeah, actually, it was just recently I had an owner interested in solar on a building. Like, we actually, every time we offer the owner a building now, whether it's a garage or a condo, we always offer solar and try to offer geothermal and encourage those kinds of things. And a lot of the time, though, there's sort of not a lot of traction, but I'm feeling it more now. Like the owners are interested, and I think especially the ones that maybe, say if it's like a REIT, these investment outfits that, parking money in rental buildings where they want long-term, may not be high returns, but long-term reasonable returns without having a lot of maintenance costs. They're also looking at, having a better footprint, lower carbon footprint, lower energy use, which is lowering their maintenance costs. So yeah, they're starting to be interested in the energy generation, even just on the payback side, because there is some there. There, based on some of the paybacks they expect, I think that there's economics behind even solar at current grid rates, on a new build, and things like that. And the geothermal is really the answer too. If you play it forward long enough, it is. And even in the shorter term, if they can get a little bit of help from the government on the grid, to put the geothermal grid in the ground. So yeah, definitely. I think that part's just going to grow and grow. That sort of delivery with some energy capability within the building. And what was the other question, Jackson?
If there are any emerging materials,
Oh yes,
that you're interested in.
yeah, actually there are, but yeah, definitely. Like carbon and concrete is one for sure. That is, and it's already emerged and it's being used actually by, companies that make concrete blocks and certain small modular concrete products. I know they've been using carbon to cure the concrete, carbon dioxide. So that's a very good one, because you're kind of turning the clock back somewhat on the carbon embodiment of the concrete. So the carbon embodiment of the concrete is mostly through the cement and the heat process related to making that cement. So when you put that carbon dioxide back in during the curing process, it kind of reverses that to some degree. And I'm still trying to find exactly what degree that is, and it probably depends on our process quite a bit. But I think it's pretty significant. And also, I've heard that you can also put it in the mixer as well with liquid concrete. So we're going to look at that as well. So fairly soon, actually, I'm pushing for that, to drop that embodied carbon. So we're looking at, we're just beginning on that, really, to look at the embodied carbon. We know it's a thing. It's like, we talk about saving fuel or energy with buildings and cars, but you also have to think about what was involved in getting it to that point to build it. So that's the embodied carbon. And so we're looking at that, and so that one's a good one. And also, I've heard there's some other great insulation products as well. There's different, insulation products that can also change their phase as well. Phase change materials. Although we haven't sort of successfully implemented any of those. I know, there's some universities, working with those sort of things, and there's been trials done on, materials that would say insulate and then maybe not insulate, or, think of wax, it gets warm enough, it goes liquid, and then when it's cold enough, it goes hard. So that's really a phase change material.
We
So
actually had an episode last season with a guy that talked about how they use hemp for insulation within mainly residential. It hasn't really gained popularity in other areas, but it is interesting to look at how people are looking at different materials and how they can be used for different applications. And it kind of really goes to what you originally said is, that this is how we've always done it. And now we're challenging that.
yeah,
So it'd be interesting to see how that type of stuff makes it into what you do, that, and even things like we've talked to people who do 3D printing and how that can help on the build
yeah,
side. Are those any things that you've started to kind of peer at and think about how it may be implemented?
yeah. Well, actually, that 3D printing is another good one. We've actually thought about that, and I've been told about that, and even just to help us sometimes making molds and things. If it's a special form, a special shape, you can sort of quickly see how it would probably save you money on custom things like that. And that's already got its uses, 3D printing, like in the automotive industry or in the machinery industry, where they're printing, say, one-off parts or ones that are out of production now, where no one has a production line anymore to do it. So, and also with these new technologies, maybe today it's no good, but tomorrow it is. And so you got to keep looking for these things. And so, yeah, I've always got my eye and ears out for these things. And we quickly, I sort of do back of the napkin sort of payback or analysis on cost. I always want to know, first thing I want to know is how much does it cost, and sometimes those answers aren't readily available, especially if it's still in the university or somewhere where it's getting tested or, still created, but there's definitely a lot of opportunities with different materials coming, I think.
Do you see us, I mean, maybe this is a loaded question, but obviously we keep talking about cost and we hear that all the time, that sustainability is expensive. Do you see us getting to a point, maybe even just with your group of clients and customers, where cost is no longer the driving force, but maybe a secondary? Or do you think it's always going to be a driving force? And if so, what is it we need to be able to prove to them in order to be able to put out more sustainable products and sustainable workflows?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. And I'm finding, that is still the norm, where they're very focused on cost, the customer. But also it depends on who the customer is. Say, for example, if we were selling, say, a condo building to a REIT versus, like a real estate investment trust versus, say, someone who's just going to develop it and sell the units. So that developer is only mostly interested in the capital cost, not so caring about the long-term maintenance cost or the operating costs or the energy use even, right? So they probably won't give me a penny more for going over the code for insulation and for going over the code on, say, a window type, because that's not going to pay them back any money. In their minds, they might not be operating with a conscience, say, of the environment or anything else, or not worried about that poorly homeowner that's going to have to buy that unit. So, but then if the client is the REIT, and I'm starting to find that discussion happening more, where I say to them, okay, well, I'd like to offer you this building, and you probably want the lowest cost, but will you entertain some other options, that will cost you more money, and we'll show you how it pays you back over time, So that comes down to the maintenance, so, okay, how much is it to maintain that building, and how much is it to run it for energy use and that sort of thing, right? So energy use and maintenance costs added together, those are big numbers for companies, and if they can cut those down, that gives them more money to put into the capital side of it.
What do you say, Jackson? You got any other questions?
I did want to ask about a particular project. This is a great time for you to brag. You won the 2020 Most Distinguished Project Award for Humber College. I was wondering if you had any comment on that.
Yes, that was a great project. Humber College is a 1,000-car parking garage that we won. Was something back in late 2016, I think, or I think we got it in early 2017. Started working on that contract and designed the building, and And from, it was just sort of a parking lot when we started, and then we turned it into this 1,000-car garage building. And yeah, I think what was really unique about that, it was unique in a few ways. One, it had sort of a retail and office component, which we managed to put that on the side of the building without actually changing the classification of the building. So that's always important to keep the costs down. If we can keep the basic garage building class intact as per the code, and manage to then integrate to some degree this other class of building, being the office and the retail aspects. So we had them on there, and that gave it a nice look. And then the college also was interested in solar, and I think they managed to get a bit of help through the grant programs the government was offering. And they had us put on a very big solar system on the building, photovoltaic. It was 700 kilowatt DC, and I think it was AC 600 kilowatts output. And the garage itself was very energy efficient. That was part of the mandate from the owner. They wanted a very energy efficient building. They were after, low energy use, low maintenance. And so I think that's why we won it, because we came in with the right price, and then managed to check all those other boxes around the environmental sustainability things they were after. And the energy use of that building, being like 1,000 cars and 300,000 square feet, was only like 30 kilowatts when everything's sort of humming. So that's not a lot for a big, huge building, like 15 to 30 kilowatts, when it's all humming. And so all of that power we were producing actually went into their grid system, into the college grid. And we set them up with a net metering program with the local power distribution company, Toronto Hydro. I don't think Toronto Hydro would ever see any of that power, because it would just go right into the campus, and it would just reduce the amount of power they're taking in off the grid, by like 600 kilowatts when the sun's shining. And the building across the road, there was a brand new building across the road being built at the same time by a different construction company, and very nice building, beautiful looking classroom building at Humber College, very well designed. And that one became a net zero building, and I think I'm sure it's because of the garage, because they tied it together with the garage. So the two of them together became net zero. And so the garage really is the power station. And we even put panels on the walls as well. They became part of the facade treatment on a couple of the walls, the ones that weren't so prominent but still visible from certain areas. And then the other two walls, which were more prominent, had a beautiful aluminum, modern looking facade. So it looks very 21st century, so very different.
This is the coolest parking garage I've ever seen.
Yeah, I was looking at the website earlier, and yeah, I mean, I wasn't even sure it was a parking garage. They look fantastic. So well done.
It looks like Apple's office or something.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, and they feel good too. They look good, and they look. They're a departure from one's vision of what a parking garage normally looked like. And when you're inside them, they feel good. They really do, because they're open, and there's no columns to hide behind or anything, right? So there's little steel columns, but they're not big enough to hide a person. So you can see right across the building. It's pretty good for surveillance.
We're kind of wrapping up, but it made me think of one thing. So we'll see if we can get the quick answer. But something I didn't think to ask is, as you're designing these parking garages and you're looking to do it differently than we've done before, are you all thinking about what happens if that parking garage no longer becomes a parking garage in its life cycle? Are you thinking about how it can be retrofitted into a office building, or is that something that's on y'all's radar?
Yes, it is. Actually, we've been asked that a few times now, and there's definitely ways we can do that to convert it later. However, if the owner, it is better if the owner says it up front, because sometimes on a parking garage you design fairly low floor to floor levels, like say 2200, which is like, say, the clearance is only an Imperial would be like 7 feet.
Yeah, we need Imperial, Ed. What is the Imperial?
So for you Imperial guys, 7 feet. which is a little low for a building, right? So,
Yeah.
but some of our garages do have a good 8 foot clear plus, right? So
Mhm.
as long as they have that, it's convertible. You can literally, we can do some things to it and make it into a building later. So it definitely can have a second life. And also it can be moved somewhat, and we do have another system that we can actually move if needed.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's another thing.
That'll be for another episode.
Yeah.
Well, Ed, we really appreciate you joining us. It's been incredibly informative, and it's interesting to just kind of hear your journey in your own career. But thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's really fun talking to you guys. So, good work.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time, Ed.